This is Scott Richmond.
And Arnie Sherman.
You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. Arnie Sherman, how are you? It's been a while.
I know, it's been a while. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great.
Today we're going to be talking all things journalism. We have a great guest coming in, Martin Kidston from the Missoula Current newspaper, a relatively new digital newspaper in town.
Yep.
And so there's lots of things to talk about related to journalism and the media and, the hot topic that didn't even exist a couple of years ago of fake news.
Yeah.
Some people think the entire United States has become one large Jerry Springer show, with what's been going on.
Who's Jerry Springer for maybe our younger audience members?
Well, he still has a show that's on during daytime. He was a controversial talk show host who brought on rather crazy people, and he was a precursor to Dr. Phil and some of these other kind of shows where you bring kind of whacked out people on the air, and you pump them with difficult questions, and you see if you can make them explode on live TV.
I now remember Jerry Springer. Wasn't he? The trade he plied was guess who the baby daddy is?
Right. He was the former mayor of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Nice guy, career. Too, I understand. Supposed to be very well respected.
Well-respected guy, thinking about running in politics again for office in Ohio, thinking about running for governor or senator in his home state of Ohio.
These days, aren't
he was an aide at one time in a very early age to Bobby Kennedy. So he has some good political lineage on the Democratic side, at least. But, the topic of fake news is just one that is just, you can't get rid of it. It's like a bad guest that's come and stayed at your house. You just can't get rid of it. And every time you think it's going to take a little bit of a fade, you have the president on his Twitter account. You have revelations about, 300 or 3,000 fake news sites, on Facebook. You have everybody arguing over, what's right and what's wrong in terms of content. It seems to be, and I think you probably agree with this, that generally speaking, fake news is the news that you don't agree with. And that's what it's become, because even facts related to climate change or facts related to
size of an audience at an inaugural,
facts about anything are being disputed now, and under this mantra, of fake news. I remember as a kid growing up in the public schools of New York, one of the things they did for me, which I was eternally grateful. I wasn't at the time because they didn't have any pictures or colored pictures. Was they made us read the New York Times. And when I hear someone talk about the New York Times, like Donald Trump has, as fake news, it just makes your blood boil. I think some of that also falls under the category of that aggregators who bring information together are not very good at quoting sources. And as you probably know, the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune or any reputable newspaper does have news which is reported 99% of the time, just based on who, what, where, when, why, the facts. Right. And then they have editorial and opinion pages where you have columnists who do express opinions.
Right.
And publications, the New York Times has liberal columnists and they have conservative, columnists. They they're well known in terms of their political lineage and their political positions on things. But sometimes that all gets jumboed. I mean, from an editorial to being viewed as, well, this is news and it's slanted news. Well, it wasn't designed to be news.
Right.
It was designed, it's
opinion.
It's opinion. USA Today has 2 opinion pages. Almost every major, newspaper have opinion pages. And that's not news.
And this is something we learned in journalism class growing up. When you had the proliferation of media in the 80s, when you were able to digitize content and there were more channels, more outlets, and you lowered the bar for someone's entry to be in the business of news, right? And you had to fill those time slots. You were starting to create different ways of aggregating and gathering news. When the media starts reporting on the media, right, that's a troublesome thing. And that was always taught to us in journalism school. The media has to carry its own weight and should cite its own sources, not other media sources. Right. And that's dangerous.
But it reminds me of the old story about, getting, in the mud with a pig. Both of you get dirty and the pig likes it.
Right.
When you have a national leader saying that the National Enquirer is a good source for news, there's something wrong.
Well, the bar's been lowered so much over the last 30 years.
Well, it's part of getting it. Just you muddy it up, and you only cherry pick out of that whole morass the things that you agree with, and then everything else is fake.
But think about it in terms of our president was a reality TV star. Reality TV was created because there was a dearth of content, and they needed to produce content inexpensively. So they said, let's put real people on. Right. So they gave him a platform and a forum. And so he feels legitimate because he was on that forum. In fact, he judges success based on your TV ratings.
Right.
Not based on the content of what you're saying.
Right. How many people are watching?
Right. How many people are watching?
The audience is more important than what you're talking about.
Right. The message.
Right.
So is the medium the message?
Marshall McLuhan? It's hard to say. And this is not being, taking a side on Trump being, right or wrong. It's just taking a side on how things have evolved from
or devolved.
Or devolved from making sure that every single word you said was accurate and being criticized for that, or even, losing a nomination because you plagiarized one thing. Now you have a situation where you have someone who shoots from the hip, doesn't check facts, and has his own staff saying, well, you can't, really, what he says is not necessarily, the truth or factual.
Or they propagate it and promote it.
Right. I mean, you can't always rely on what he says.
Where were you with Sean Spicer being on the Emmys? What was your reaction to that?
Well, I didn't like it. I didn't like the fact that people like the Mooch, Scaramouche, and Spicer are now being held up as some kind of journalistic, experts or being legitimized after they served in, they got fired out of their jobs because they were bad guys.
I can't wait to talk. Let's talk to our guest about this. There's a lot of good open questions, right?
Sure.
So Martin Kidston is our guest. He is the founder of the
editor of the new Missoula Current.
Founder and editor of the Missoula Current.
Digital newspaper that has a lot of readership here.
Yeah, and he's actually, he's covering a lot of what's going on, especially in local politics over the last couple of weeks. We have a lot to talk to him about. You are listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, proudly supported and sponsored by Don Maddox, Glacier Sotheby's International Realty. Back after this with Martin Kidston. All right, we are back with our guest, Martin Kidston.
Martin, welcome.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys.
So the question that our listeners probably would like me to ask right off the bat is, why a new newspaper in Missoula? We have the Independent, we have the Missoulian, we have, all the digital media that's out there. What possessed you to create the new current digital newspaper?
I ask myself that every morning getting out of bed.
Yeah.
Not joking. I really do. It goes back to my days at our competitor here in Missoula, the Missoulian. I worked for that company for 17 or 18 years. The Helena Independent Record, the Billings Gazette, of course, the Missoulian. I worked at the Havre Daily News. I worked at the Silver State Post. That was my first newspaper job. So I had a good understanding of print journalism, and that product has changed dramatically over the 2 decades that I worked for the company. And I felt at the time, somewhat egotistically perhaps, that the product could be done differently, the news could be done differently, and we can focus on things that I felt were getting overlooked by the local media, and that runs from business news to growth and development to how we cover local politics, and so on and so forth. So, there were some instances there at the Missoulian that just kind of led me to believe that this was the right time and to give it a shot. I'm not getting any younger, so I'm not going to do it now, then when am I going to do it? So I basically gave notice, left, and started the Missoula Current the next morning.
Which was when?
That was December of 2015. The day would have been might have been Christmas Eve, in fact.
So you're into this almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
And how are things going?
They're going great. They're going great. Yeah, we set new growth trends every month. Our readership is up. Our page clicks are increasing. We're working on a revenue model. That's probably the biggest challenge, but it's going pretty well. We really want to get to a place where we can grow our news team and start to focus on some of the stories and the topics that we don't have the staffing to cover at this point in time. So, that's our goal for next year, and I really do think we can reach that and get there.
Well, I remember I grew up in lots of other places outside of Montana, although I've been here over 20 years now. But I remember in Chicago in particular, I watched the news because there was a lot of investigative reporting on TV, and there was always a segment every night of something interesting, and either a politician getting busted doing something wrong or some scandal. Chicago is rife for that. There used to be more of that when I first came to Montana, when covering Helena and it seemed to have dissipated.
It has. I agree 100%. That's one of the reasons why I decided to do this, thinking we can help. The print product, Lee Enterprises, has basically decimated, their product. They've eliminated their Capitol Bureau. They had Chuck Johnson and Mike Dennison. They were stalwarts of Capitol reporting. Everybody trusted them. They looked to their stories for context. They replaced them with some new reporters who do a great job. One of those new reporters has recently been reassigned to cover education in Missoula. So now they're down to one person covering the Capitol. And it's my understanding that person is really not even at the Capitol.
Right.
They're out roaming the state because the industry, the corporation, wanted somebody to go tell stories. They don't have a watchdog covering the committee meetings. They don't have anybody watching the votes, who's saying what. And that's missing very deeply, I believe.
Well, it's really not only is it missing in print media or digital media, but it's also missing in TV. You don't get any in-depth stories unless it's something that's too big to overlook.
Right. I think the news has kind of been reduced to sound bites, and I think that's a shame. And really it's up to the readers to demand more. And go to the product that they trust and go to the product that they believe offers the full and complete story.
Right.
Are you a big fan of social media, both either on a professional or a personal level?
Well, that's kind of a split thing. We have to use it because we don't have a morning newspaper to put in front of people with their coffee. So we use social media to promote our stories. But when I say promote, I just say provide a link in the headline to bring people to our site. And I think that's essential in this day and age with journalism. When if you're referring to promoting oneself or voicing one's political grievances through social media, that I guess there's the First Amendment right. You're entitled to do what you want, but I think that comes with a little bit of pushback.
The reason I ask is because it provides the feedback loop that either, analogous on radio is the call-in, right?
Yeah, see that. Yeah, I think that's the point. Yeah, but I think on the radio, you sort of know your callers, and you can hold them accountable by having a conversation with them like we are now.
And we could edit them too. I mean, you can always you can edit them, especially with live radio. It's a little more challenging, but you could also edit social media, and figure out who you'd like to have continuing commenting, or you delete them.
Yeah, I think that's what's missing on social media. There is no feedback conversation, and I think too many people take what they read on social media to be true.
Right, and the comments are usually by people who either viscerally support or react to it rather than, professional journalists.
It's amazing that in 140 characters in Twitter, you're limited to 140 characters. And in those 140 characters, you can be completely pissed off and hate somebody or say right on, I agree with you 100%.
Right.
That's amazing in 140 characters.
And push it out and reach thousands of people.
Millions of people.
But the interesting thing is that especially in a town like Missoula, Montana, social media, is, even in the years that I've been here, I've seen it grow, and people have taken more to Facebook, Twitter still, even to a lesser extent, but it's almost an essential to work in media. I mean, we certainly do it.
Well, there's a new criteria that we've never seen before. I mean, I heard, for example, on the news today that last weekend, the president tweeted 25 times. Tweeted, 25 times, and none of those were about the disaster and the humanitarian situation in Puerto Rico, and they were all about the NFL.
I saw that on CNN. Yeah,
now you're being judged on how many of your are directed. I mean, when was a president of a country, the United States, ever judged by something like that?
No president's ever taken to social media the way this particular president has. So in a way, he's a trendsetter, I think, but it's also going to come with some blowback. If you're going to tweet 17 times about the NFL and one time about the disaster in Puerto Rico, it's probably going to raise questions.
It tells
because
a story about what your interest is and your focus
your
is.
priorities, right?
Right. I mean,
I also think this president is unique in that, or remarkable in that, media and ratings and media acceptance is the currency with which he trades. He's not, whether it's correct or incorrect is not the point. The point is, how many people can he reach? What were his ratings? Right.
He's a grand self-promoter. He's probably the best I've
Right.
seen in my years paying attention to.
well,
presidential
P.T.
politics.
Barnum comes to mind, right,
Yeah,
when you
well,
think about him.
Yeah.
We created this. We created this. We opened the door to this. You could trace this well beyond modern media too. This goes back
No.
into the 1700s in terms of
But
politicians.
but when when Lincoln Douglas debates and they sullied each other's reputation, it didn't instantaneously reach 300 million people.
Right.
Right. No, right. It didn't. It carried through.
You tweet, he's got 58. President apparently has 58 million followers. On his.
And I'd have to, the thing about him tweeting, and of course he can tweet. He says he's reaching his audience unfiltered, which is understandable. But the problem with Twitter is there's no way to hold what he says, hold him accountable to his tweets. We often hold our politicians accountable for their statements and for their votes. There's no way to do that through Twitter. How do you hold a guy accountable through Twitter?
Well, not only that, but you have people that are in his employ saying, well, you got to take this with a grain of salt. This is, a reaction to situation. I mean, they're almost saying, literally that,
but then
you can't take it seriously.
Right. But then we see the media reporting what he tweets.
Right.
And,
he's getting a double bang for his buck. Okay. He's controlling the message through his own media, which
Right.
is Twitter. Right. So the intermediary,
Personally controlling it.
Right. He's personally controlling. So he's already bypassed traditional media. And then traditional media is still reporting on him. So he's getting two bites of the apple every
Right.
time he does something.
he's a genius when it comes to self-promotion.
Yeah.
Whether
Right,
you
and
like
that-
him or not, he's a good
Well,
self-promoter.
but that speaks to the fact that in this modern era of politicking and campaigning, if you don't have somebody who's media savvy and knows how to manipulate all of that,
I think he's changed the game.
yeah, barring
certainly
any
he's changed the
Russian
game.
interference.
Well, when has news been under such constant attack as being fake? Anything that is critical of, in this case, we're talking about anything critical of the president, anything he doesn't like is fake.
Mm-hmm.
New York Times is fake. Chicago.
That's the easy scapegoat, and he's created a war with the media by doing so.
yeah,
And I think that's by design. So
Sure.
it's not accidental that he's calling people fake news and fake reporters, and but then tweets fake news
himself.
So
Yeah, right.
So, question for Martin is that so now in all of this, right? I mean, this is an exciting time to launch a media platform because there are so many tools at your disposal, and there is a vacuum in Missoula that you're filling, which is great. What type of what's your edict? What's your kind of mantra from an editorial standpoint that you share with your readers and your staff that says here's what we're about?
So I just want to clarify that we don't do editorials in the old-fashioned sense. We're not going to really come down as a corporation or a company, supporting one candidate over another candidate,
Right.
or one policy over another candidate. You may see an individual reporter express an opinion, but when you talk about what our principles are, we have bookmarks basically on what we cover, because one of the theories or one of the guiding principles of what we're doing is we want to be good at some things and not try to be poor at everything.
Right.
So we're going to do what we do well and focus on those things. And that, it's not the sexiest topics in the world, but it's growth and development, because that's a big issue in Missoula. It's business and economics, because there's a lot of exciting things going on in Missoula that don't get reported anywhere else. And it's local politics, because we think we do it fair and balanced, and we're pretty deep into what they do on a daily basis. We'd like to expand to state politics. We'd like to push into more environmental reporting. That's really our bookends. I know it's not glamorous, but
it's meat and potatoes that people need to hear.
Right. There's no sexiness. We want to be, this is kind of dumb, but we want to be the Wall Street Journal of Missoula. It's
Right.
But I respect what they do. They do it well. We don't want fluff. You're not going to read silly stories in the Missoula Current. You're not going to read Cops and Courts, although that has a place, I got to say, but you're not going to read
You're not going to have a lot
pages, by
of.
the
You're
way.
not going to have a lot of cat pictures.
We're not going to have cat pictures. We're not going to have grandma quilting,
Right.
which is good for grandma,
Recipes.
but no recipes.
But you're hard news. You're the hard news of the who, what, when, where, and why of things that matter to Missoula.
That's what we'd like to think,
Right,
and
right.
our readership may never, be, 500,000 subscribers, but we like to think that the people who do read us are the people who are.
And how many discrete readers do you have?
We topped 100,000 for the first time this summer.
Wow,
which
that's great.
Was a new
That's
benchmark
great.
because at that point last year we had 18,000.
I love the new. I love the new layout. It's very easy to maneuver, and it's clean.
I
and
appreciate
it's
that. That was Cedar Mountain Software right here in Missoula did that. And, and that's another. You ask about the principles. We try to keep everything local. Our web designers were local. Our credit card processor is local. Our social media people that we're working to build something new and exciting on is local. We believe we're 100% local. We're not outsourcing jobs to foreign countries. We're not sending revenue back to Davenport, Iowa, like our competitor does. We do everything we can to keep that money right here in Missoula because we want to be a local product that focuses hyper-locally on what Missoula is.
Right.
How many folks are you guys employing right now?
Well, we have 3.
Right, I was going to say how many. But that's still a lot though, because
There's 3, but really we have the punch of 7. I think we have Sherry Devlin. She does a lot of our copy editing. She puts out one of our products called Montana Today and Missoula Business Weekly. We can talk about those, but those are great. She writes stories. Lisa Vaccio is our pseudo publisher, community development. So she works on advertising and partnerships, and she's doing a great job. And we really, for a small team, I think we pack a punch, and we are looking to grow that. So
Sure, and you got a lot of experience in the local community, so you know how to get a hold of everyone.
Yeah, I've been in Missoula since college, off and on since 1997.
And Sherry's been here a long time.
Been here a long time. Lisa's been here 20 years.
I like Lisa. Lisa.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about just briefly with in 6 weeks we have a mayor's race here in town.
Mm-hmm. Exciting.
What are the issues that are fermenting that you would report on, that you would? I know you're not going to take sides and endorse somebody,
right.
But what are the issues that would capture your readers' interest about the upcoming mayor's race?
Let me do a quick ID. Our guest is Martin Kidston. Kidston, correct? Founder of the Missoula Current. Go back with your question.
Right.
Yeah. So local. So you have one candidate. You have the challenger, the challenger Lisa Tripke, who has basically based her entire campaign on taxes. She believes that taxes are too high. She believes there's waste in local government, although she hasn't been able to stipulate where that waste is. She believes it's there. And she has a lot of people who do, in fact, believe what she says and will probably support her. You have the incumbent mayor who is, one could argue that's been rather successful. In the last 4 years, the economy in Missoula has picked up. We have growth and development. Our tax base is expanding. Whether you agree with Mountain Water or not, they defeated a global conglomerate to take over that company. That's a big win. So he has some successes to hold on to.
Sure.
And he's also vulnerable to some criticisms. And I think Lisa Tripke could possibly, drive a wedge into one of those criticisms, and that's possibly taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see where that goes. I don't know if that's a wide enough argument, in my opinion,
right,
to be successful. I think, as we all know, Missoula leans a little bit to the left, and they're more than a one-topic town. They want to talk about human rights. They want to talk about transportation. They want to talk about environmental quality.
Right.
They want to talk about housing prices, things like that. So,
well, decreasing taxes is sort of
everybody says that,
right? Everybody,
the mayor says that.
Well, who wants to? Yeah, right. I mean, who's going to? If you got a room of 5,000 people, say, who wants your taxes to go up? Raise your hand.
Exactly.
No one's raising their hand. So it is a popular
pain point for everybody,
right? But in fact, based on your research as a journalist, are our taxes out of line? Are our taxes higher? I saw a couple of things online. Again, I didn't see the original source saying we're even in Montana, we're not one of the highest taxes.
We're not. A recent study came out that we're in the middle of the road when it comes to our sister cities across Montana. That includes Billings, Helena, Great Falls, Bozeman, and Kalispell. We're right in the middle of that when it comes to how our taxing is done. Taxes have gone up every year under the mayor, with the exception of this last year. But one could also argue that's the cost of running a city. Missoula's growing. It's not a town of 30,000 people anymore. Our population grows, our transportation needs grow, our community needs grow.
And of course, if you have a union and you're dealing with
pay wages grow, health insurance.
I mean,
grows.
and that's the biggest piece of a city budget is always wages.
So you say a 3% tax increase. Right. Well, that might just be the cost of living, cost of doing business for local government.
Sure,
I don't know that for sure. Where the cost of living stops and taxing starts. But
right.
I think it's a little bit easy to say I'm going to lower taxes, but not offer a plan on how you're going to do that, other than say we're going to hunt down waste
Right.
You ask, where's that waste? I don't know. Everybody says it's there.
Right.
So we'll see
Very
what happens.
complicated. It's a complicated puzzle.
Right. And of course, then you have the issue of, Helena and state issues. Right now we're facing, I think the biggest issue in the state is there was I think a irrational exuberance about how much revenue was going to be generated. And they built a budget around that. Yeah. And now we don't have that revenue coming in.
That's going to hurt. We're going to see those cuts take place here pretty soon.
Well, particularly the university town, if the state cuts 10% out of a university budget, people are going to feel that.
Health and Human Services, our vulnerable citizens,
Right.
Help me understand something, Martin. Let's shift a little bit from local politics to the university. Was it last week they had a whole they were going to truck out the four
candidates. There's four finalists out of 99 applicants.
Out of 99 applicants. But when I was reading about that, it sounded like there was a less than successful kind of presentation of those candidates. Tell us what happened there.
Well, it's my understanding that some people, as we talked about earlier, you can't please everybody. So the university, as they did the last time around when they hired the last president, they narrowed down to their four preferred finalists, and they have those finalists sit for basically what amounts to a public job interview. They're up in front of an audience. The audience gets asked questions. The audience gets to see their personality, what their priorities would be. And while they don't have a role in the hiring process, the university does use that interview and how they do as part of their score on who they select. I don't know what percent that amounts to, but it is part of the overall qualification of how they interact with the public. So we'll see, how they decide and what they believe the priorities to be.
What was your takeaway? Were you present for each of those?
I didn't sit through all of them, no, and that's why we didn't cover all of them, because we couldn't be there for every single one of them. I've read probably what you've read. And I've done a little research on their backgrounds prior to that.
Well, there's two major criticisms that comes out of the academic.
Yeah, that's your world.
Right. So the two major criticisms of all the candidates are one is that they're very business oriented and they're not academicians. They're secondly, they don't come from any prestigious universities.
Yeah, I think people want personality and they want to see them place liberal arts foremost among all things. And as we talked about earlier, in the digital landscape changing the news world, education has also changed. I had a philosophy degree and I had an English major and a philosophy minor. It did nothing for me. I mean, it made me smarter,
right?
And it gave me a worldview, but it didn't prepare me for a job.
Well, the other reality is, while I think with the base salary is $285, seems like a pretty good salary compared to the typical salary in Missoula, Montana. There are a lot of people say, I'd take that job for $285, right?
But it's not competitive when you look at
what you can't even get in some places you can't even get a department chair for that amount of money, particularly from the prestigious institutions and universities. Mm-hmm. I took a look at the same thing when they're interviewing a football coach. Mm-hmm. If you take a look at what the top 50 football coaches make, in the United States, the top 50 are, over 500,000 up to 10 million, and we pay what, $185 or $200,000 a year. So there is a legitimate issue of what you can get here. Based on the criteria based on the criteria the critics have laid out. You're not going to get somebody from Columbia University, who was the provost, to come to Montana to take this job unless the love of their life lives here or they're in witness protection program.
That's absolutely true. Martin Kidston is our guest on What Do You Know? Martin, talk a little bit about your path to Missoula, because where did you grow up?
I grew up in Denver, Colorado.
Okay, Denver, Colorado. And, Arnie, he was at the University of Montana, so he came here and stayed here.
Right.
He also did a fairly significant tour of as a Marine, a U.S. Marine.
Yeah, so that's how I ended up in Montana, basically. I left Denver in 1988 when I joined the Marine Corps, and I did the Marine Corps for 6 years, was in Desert Storm, Arctic Circle training up in Norway, Japan twice, and, I got out in 94. At that time, my mother was living in Great Falls, and so I moved to Great Falls. I got a job at the oil refinery up there in Black Eagle, and decided I was going to stay. And at some point, I realized that I didn't want to work at an oil refinery for the rest of my life, so I moved to Missoula and went to college, and that's what brought me here.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service to our country. We appreciate that. And, it's very topical, but what do you make of everything that's going on now with the Colin Kaepernick and
I was hoping you'd ask me that, because
Neil.
Just because I am so behind the NFL players right now. I think, and that may sound strains coming from a former veteran, but
That's
I
what
believe
you
that's
fought for.
that's their First Amendment right. They're entitled to kneel. They're entitled to protest what they see as
Right.
being wrong with the nation. I think it's very short-sighted, in my opinion, for the president to try to reduce that argument to a disrespecting of the flag. He's overlooking everything and every reason that they're doing. He's overlooking the lives have been ruined. He's overlooking the challenges that some of our minority friends and neighbors face. And I think that's a short-sighted approach to being a world leader. So I support the NFL players, and I like what they're doing, and I hope they keep doing it. I'd like to see baseball do it. I'd like to see
There is no
NASCAR,
more.
NBA.
There is no
Yeah, they
more
are.
passive way to protest than to take
you
a
can't
knee.
be any more passive and peaceful. And
I
try to
mean,
get
you
a point
remember in
across.
'68 in the Olympics, they did the Black Power sign.
Yeah, I was
right?
born in '68, so I don't remember, but I know what you're talking
Yeah, right.
about.
I mean, that was the one they refer back to as and some people have criticized them for being,
Mexico
this is
City.
the worst example of. No, it's not.
The Mexico
know.
City Olympics.
Well, from sports people,
Right.
You know,
Well,
and
sports
the
people-
criticism is they're higher, they're overpaid, millionaire, blah blah blah. But that's not the issue.
Well, you can default to that, and you can default to the simple kind of rhetoric
Well, I
that-
just
that,
saw-
that Trump does.
I don't take them kneeling as an offense to what I did in my time
Right.
at service.
It's what you fought for.
Exactly.
To Arnie's point.
Right.
It's interesting, but did
By the
you
way,
get-
the same people who are critical of the players kneeling were not necessarily critical of another player who kneeled in support of God, right?
Where was the criticism when the white supremacists were marching through
With
town?
Tim
right.
Tebow?
When Tim Tebow took the knee.
Right.
He took a knee in order to pray.
He had every right to do that.
And that was the same thing they're doing for a
Right.
different reason.
Well, because God is involved.
Well, God in a different way.
Well, a question for Martin though,
What?
which is, where did you get the journalism bug? Was it in the Marines?
No, it wasn't. This is kind of a silly story. My mother passed away this summer, but not the best.
Sorry
but
to hear that.
she my letters home apparently from Desert Storm she thought were good letters. She told me she
Sure.
considered being a writer, and that just kind of stuck because I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do, so I became a writer.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean that's basically as simple as that. Here's another part of the story, and I guess I could say on the radio, but I graduated with an English major and a philosophy minor, and I couldn't get a job, so I took a job as a bouncer at the old Mulligan Strip Club down in Higgins Avenue, and I worked there for probably 4 months as a bouncer at a strip joint with a college degree, and I just didn't see a bright future in that either. But I had a girlfriend at the time who was in the traveling theater, and she was going to Deer Lodge with the old prison players for the summer show.
Right.
And I said, I'll just come with you because I got nothing else to do. And I walked in the Silver State Post one day and said, I got an English degree as a graduate. Can I help you out? And they said yes. And that's how I got in the newspapers.
Is that right?
That is it. Yeah.
That's a great story. Actually, wow, isn't that interesting that you graduate with a college degree? You could either work at a Starbucks back in the day, or a coffee shop. But hey, Mulligan's.
Yeah, second best thing, right?
Second best.
Now you and I would
Talk
like
about a cup of coffee.
You and I would like a job like that.
I know a number of people that have had jobs like
I
that.
I wasn't old, big enough and mean enough to be a good bouncer, but I did my best.
There was always
Oh,
there's that
what's the
old joke.
offense?
There was that old Woody Allen joke about how he worked as a burlesque house backstage,
Right.
being a stagehand. And they said, "Well, what'd you get for that?" And they said $400. And they said, "That wasn't very much money." And he said, "Well, that's all I could afford."
That's good.
Great.
Yeah.
Our guest is Martin Kidston. He is the founder and editor of the Missoula Current on Newstalk KGVO, proudly presented by Don Maddox, Glacier Sotheby's International Realty. Arnie?
So sponsorship money, you have sponsors, right?
Yeah, we like to call them sponsors instead of advertisers.
Right. You have sponsors that because on the page and
Right.
and it looks like it's growing. The number of people that are supporting what you're doing is growing.
It is going in the right direction for sure.
And where are you getting your expertise about digital media and digital marketing and all
so
of that?
I came to this from with the journalistic experience. I
Right.
had absolutely zero business experience.
Right.
And I like to think I maybe have 15% business experience now. I rely on the team that we built. It's really, Lisa and Sherry who are bringing individual skills to the table. You put the three of us together, we got a good product. And Lisa's been a great asset. She's out there. She's got a business degree. She is like, tells me the things I don't even know.
Sure.
So, I mean, that probably poor English there, but the fact of the matter is I learn every single day on the business aspect, of running a business as opposed to just being a reporter. It's not easy, but it's a lot easier to go out and interview somebody, write a story, and post it online and have a vision for what you want the product to stand for.
Right.
It's a whole different thing to try to find the time in a day and go out and run a business.
Sure. If there were one or two stories that you wish you had more time to, to research and to dig into, what would they be?
I'd like to really get in on our congressional race that's gearing up.
Right.
We have a Senate race that's gearing up, and I'd like to take a deeper look at some of our environmental issues. I mean, I know a lot of people don't believe in climate change, but, things are changing. And, I think that, it would be worth our time to take a look at those, not from one perspective or another perspective,
Right.
but a fair and balanced perspective.
Sure. I've heard that argument also change a little among the people that are that have been deniers. They are now have switched. Many of them have switched to a position where they're not denying there's change. They're just not attributing it to human activity.
Yeah, I don't care what you attribute it to. We can call it what we want to call it, global warming, climate change. We can call it, another day in Montana. But the fact of the matter is things are changing. I think anybody from any political stripe can just look at what happened last summer, look at Glacier Park and look at our streams in late summer, how low they are and how hot they are, fishing restrictions, different changes in species migration and patterns. It's very clear. It's become very clear. And if it's not, then no one's going to convince
Well,
me.
I mean, look at Puerto Rico and Florida.
Bigger storms.
Bigger storms.
Longer summers in Montana, shorter winters.
Yeah, and
early runoff.
And basically, whether it is human caused or not, I just heard a matter of fact weather a person talking on a interview show who said water is getting warmer. That means more of it's going to go in the air, and that means we're going to get bigger storms.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
I mean,
boil a pot of water stove and see what happens to it. It evaporates and the water goes up.
Yeah.
It makes your house
and there's no refuting that the oceans are warming. And that's just, this is going to be the nature of it. And it really affects everybody's life. I mean, if you've decided on your retirement, you're going to move to, Miami Beach and, that's a warm climate, it may not be the place that it used to be.
I heard a statistic on some station. I think it was saying that there are these every 500-year events that have happened.
3 of them happened in 1 week.
in 21 months.
Minutes, I think.
Yeah,
60 minutes. It's like in 21 months.
Well, it is scary.
Right.
If you're planning to move or change your life for some reason, or you're young and you've just graduated and you're trying to pick a place to go based on previous track record, it's changing.
You might actually be able to sell oceanfront property in Arizona pretty soon.
Yeah, really. Really.
I wish we can all come together as a country and a people and put our differences aside and find middle ground to solve some of our problems. And you know what? If I'm going to complain about politics in Washington, I think that's the biggest breakdown, is the fact that they can't find a way to work together and present a compromised solution.
Right.
You
mentioned 60 Minutes. You saw John McCain, who was a lifelong Republican, right? And he's in very bad shape. He has the same brain cancer that Ted Kennedy had. And no one knows how much time he has, but it's not that much longer. And he stood up on the floor of the Senate with an opportunity to say anything he wanted, and he's voted against the latest incarnation of the anti-Obamacare bill. But he said the only solution to the problems we're having in healthcare are going to be ones in which Republicans and Democrats work together. And it hasn't happened in the last 20, 25 years.
It hasn't, and I think all we can do is control what happens on the local level. And I do believe the Missoula City Council works pretty good at trying to represent all their constituents.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's going to win a political debate. You're not always going to get your way on a vote. And just because you don't doesn't mean they're ignoring you. But I think our elected officials here in Missoula, at least, do listen to the people of this town.
Well, the old adage is all politics are local, right? And at the county or city level, you generally get elected officials who reflect the constituency they represent. So if it's a conservative, you get conservative, and here it's, as you mentioned, leans to the left, and so we have a lean to the left government.
And I was in Cody, Wyoming for a while, and it leans to the right, to the far right, and there was no other representation. So it does work both ways.
Right.
And, we were talking about some editorials recently, and I think of the Les Spiker op-ed in the Missoulian recently, and it's kind of like don't let the door hit you on your ass on the way to town. If you hate it here that much, go somewhere else, because this is the town that people built because this is the town they want. Yeah,
right. That's true.
If you don't like it, leave. And I have no sympathy for that kind of argument.
So Martin, with two years almost under your belt doing the Current, have any other markets in Montana reached out to you and said, "Hey, is this something that we could replicate and put in Bozeman or in Billings?
We are working on some partnerships, and we have a product called Montana Today, and we're working to grow that into a statewide product. It's still kind of in development. We currently have a partnership with Last Best News in Billings, which is run by Ed Kemick, a former Billings Gazette reporter.
Right.
There's a reporter that used to work with Gannett up in Great Falls called Jen. Her name's Jen. She's got a product now called The Electric. It's pretty much brand new. There's another one coming online down in West Yellowstone that covers environmental things. So you're starting to see this kind of momentum begin to pick up.
Sure.
And it's like drinking through a fire hose. I hope that they all make it. I would suspect that some of them may not. It's very challenging to start from nothing and build it into something.
Because if it doesn't work, what you're really stuck with is going on Facebook and reading what your friends say or your friends direct you to, and you don't get any kind of systematic coverage of anything. It's just bits and pieces.
I think everybody's goal is to try to shed light on things that their local paper's not covering, and create a second truthful.
They have a local paper, by the way.
Right? Yeah,
and create a truthful alternative. I'm not talking about a fake news alternative or an alternative that leans to the left or to the right, but a truthful, moderate, objective alternative to what people currently get.
Right. Are you involved with any national organizations that publish digitally like you're publishing?
Not yet. Not
okay.
yet.
Are there those is there that
there's some larger ones. I don't know of any national ones. Maybe the Huffington Post or things like that, or the Drudge Report, or what's that right-leaning thing called Breitbart? So those are out there,
right?
But there's. But
I was wondering if there were small. There was an association of local digital newspapers.
I don't know of one. No,
there used to be. There used to be like the weeklies had a whole consortium of weekly newspapers that all plugged in. That's where the Independent actually, I think applied a lot of their trade. Meanwhile, what do you think about the Independent, being kind of purchased by Lee Enterprises? Like, what is?
How could it be called the Independent anymore?
Well, I don't know if you can call it Independent anymore, but I understand the Matt Gibson's business decision. He did what he thought was right, for himself, and what he thought was right for his product. We'll see if that holds bear. I can tell you right now that I'm highly doubtful that Lee Enterprises is going to subsidize a weekly newspaper for very long. I don't think they're going to do that. Just look at how they've downsized their own staffing over the years.
Right.
They're not going to subsidize a weekly paper for very long unless that weekly paper stands on its own and brings in its own revenue. We'll see what happens. They probably can and last a while. But, print newspapers it's like watching the horse cart coming to town or the first vehicle rolling to town.
Right.
The times change, and we'll see what happens.
Very few people. I mean, in the whole journalistic world, I don't know anybody anymore. I'm sure there are that reads Time Magazine or Newsweek. I mean, in a print.
I think a lot of those have folded and they've gone to pictures and they have a bigger online presence than they ever used to.
Yeah, somebody gave me a subscription, a print subscription to Sports Illustrated.
Me too.
It's about 16 pages.
Yeah, it's like a pamphlet.
Only 16 pages now.
I mean, it's nothing. It's the thinnest
Except
little
the
newspaper.
swimsuit issue.
The swimsuit should be like as thick as a Sunday paper.
Well,
on
that one
Thanksgiving morning.
makes the money for the whole rest of the year.
It probably does.
But by the time you get it in the mail, there's nothing in it unless that you can't get everywhere else.
Tanning supplies.
Well, it's like that with the local paper, and I'm not here to badmouth. But I went to the Saturday paper. It had 3 pages of news. 2 of those stories were local. The rest was AP press release, and everything else was full page advertising.
Right.
And they charge an exorbitant amount of money for their product.
I agree with you. Let's put a pin in that. When we come back, we'll have our final moments with Martin Kidston, founder and editor of the Missoula Current. Back after this. Okay, we are back with Martin Kidston.
We haven't talked about the most important and often controversial topic in Missoula, Montana.
Let's do it.
The Grizz.
Oh, the Grizz
football team. We lost to Eastern at home in front of the largest crowd in school history.
Yeah, boy, it's so great to have a football team like that and that kind of energy here in our town. But I'd sure like to see them get back on a winning streak like they were in my day in college when they won their first national championship.
Sure,
I miss those days when their yellow helmets and their silly pants and that was fun though watching them win. We used to sit on the grass hill before there was an end zone.
Right.
Remember the grass hill?
Sure.
Yeah, I remember that we sat up there in snowstorms and watched them play.
On one hand you can say, look, things have gotten, more competitive. There's, the Big Sky Conference has grown.
But we got to compete. We got to keep up.
But then but on the other side, you have North Dakota State that won it 5 years in a row, right?
Exactly. And look at the success of schools like Marshall, who moved up into the FCS, or who else? There's a couple of them, drawing a blank. But there's been successes of schools like Missoula moving up a conference and having success.
Right.
So,
I think until we're back to where we were before, I don't think we can talk about moving up into the one of the other conferences. But do we? What do we think's happened?
I don't know.
Is it coaching? I mean, a lot of people want to play coaching.
I could be an armchair quarterback and tell you what I think is wrong.
Well, that's what I want to know.
Quit going for fourth downs, quit throwing bombs down the sideline, establish a running game, grind out yardage 3 yards at a time, play smash mouth, old-fashioned football, and play some defense once in a while. I mean, what is the last 2 games the opponent scored 45 points? And two, I know we're talking about Washington University. I get it.
Right.
But East, we've been Washington schools have scored over 100 points on our football team in the last 2 weeks.
I know.
And that's not good.
Well, and we're going to be we're going to Portland State on Saturday, which is not going to be an easy one.
I support the school. I love the Grizz, and I want to see them be successful. And it's so exciting to be in Missoula and be able to walk down and see the lights on a Saturday night, and enjoy that enviment and that culture.
And we have
so
the
win
new
or lose,
championship center,
win or lose
champion
is still
center.
Fun. And those guys are playing hard. I'm not saying they're not. Obviously they're playing good football, but
there's a different coaching style. I remember when Bobby Houck was here, and Bobby had all the winning teams, but people always said the same thing: he can't win the big one, right? Mm-hmm. Even though we would go 11-3, or we'd make it to the playoffs every year, and maybe make it to the national championship.
I can't imagine the pressure that Coach Ditt's under.
Sure,
I think he knows that his back's against the wall. This is do or die this year. If he doesn't win, he's out. I don't think a 500 season is going to cut it. But the university's in transition, so we'll see. Maybe they give him another year. Maybe it takes that long to develop a program. I don't know. You have a senior quarterback that looks good, and then he goes out. He shatters his think of the
fibula.
freshman in 2 years. He's playing really good football.
I think he's playing great football, but he's a freshman. He went up again. I mean, Eastern had the FCS Player of the Year quarterback, and it's almost impossible for a freshman to beat a guy like that.
Yeah.
And when all said and done, we only lost by a touchdown. We
should have lost though.
Well, they were the 11th ranked team in the country, and we're not.
Yeah, but that's no excuse. I mean, they had a 3-score lead at home and whatever.
Well, that's Missoula for you. You got the strong feelings.
If people want to disagree with your point of view, how would they reach you?
They can write me an email at info@MissoulaCurrent.com.
Info@MissoulaCurrent.com. Where are you on Facebook?
We are on Facebook at MissoulaCurrent.com. We have our Twitter page at MissoulaCurrent.com. We have an Instagram page at MissoulaCurrent.com. We're pretty easy to find. I like to hear from people, whether you agree with me or not. We can always talk. So,
right, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm enjoying the Missoula Current. I find it to be very.
It's my go-to newspaper now. I have one. I read the New York Times. I read the the news feeds to see what's going on.
Yep.
I try to read one of the British newspapers. Usually, I want to hear a European perspective on things. I look at the Christian Science Monitor because they're always. I haven't heard the president criticizing them yet, so I can take a look at the Christian Science Monitor. And the Missoula Current is my go-to local paper.
Well, I sure appreciate that. That's great because a year ago nobody even knew we existed.
Well, you've made a lot of inroads, and you've made a lot of
that's great
friends.
Thank you very much, you guys. Thanks.
Hey, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Martin. Right. Arnie, I think you have some good news to share with our listeners.
Yes, I do. With your support and encouragement, I have launched a podcast show on Montana Public Radio. That is up on their website as we speak.
And is that mtpr.org?
Yes, mtpr.org. The show is called Can Do, Lessons from Savvy Montana Entrepreneurs, and it's a show about business and entrepreneurship in Montana, and it's a podcast only, and we'll be airing 2 episodes a month for the rest of the year.
Wonderful, Arnie. Congratulations. If you want more Arnie Sherman, you now can get it at mtpr.org. See you next week.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to What Do You Know?
I can't wait for the next show, Scott.
I'm excited too, Arnie. If you'd like to suggest a guest, send me an email at scottrichman@townsquaremedia.com. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening to Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290, 101.5 FM, and newstalkkgvo.com.